at the secret war of Laos, which has been a tragedy for many people. I was among these many people. To this day, I often find myself thinking about things that happened to my family during the war. The Vietnam War started more than 50 years ago when the CIA established headquarters in Thailand, and the CIA needed pilots. So they recruited young men to be pilot. My dad was one of them, and he went to Thailand for training, flying T-28. So when he done, he was to come back and go and bomb Vietnamese bases. And during one of his missions in 1971, December 1971, his plane got shot down and he was never found after that. And I was very young. I was probably maybe 2.5 at that time, so I don't have any recollection of him at all. In May of 1975, when the war was over for the United States, the CIA pulled out of Laos. But as for us, the Hmong people, the war goes on, it continues. Some people were fleeing to Thailand, but my mom decided that we need to move back to the countryside with my relatives, because I have 3 sisters, and me and my mom, and she's a single mom, so she doesn't want to go to a new country. So we went back up to the mountain and lived with my grandma and my grandpa and my uncles and aunt. So once we get there, it was very hard for us because we have never been live in the countryside before. We always live in the city. So farming was hard for us. My mom was the only one that was supporting us at the time, because before that it was my dad's income. And now she has to farm. My older sister was about 12 years old at that time. So she and my baby sister, who wasn't born when my dad was gone, she was born 8 months after my dad was gone. They went to the farm with my mom every day. My second sister and I, because of lack of food, we went out in the jungle and dig for Chinese wild yam. You guys know what those are? Every day to substitute as food too. And then one afternoon of 1976, our village was bombed. That night we fled from village to village, and we keep going. Then we went up to high up in the mountain, so we moved constantly, moving night after night from place to place, just so our enemy would not be closing it on us. After 2 years of hiding, my uncle, who was the leader at the time with our group, realized that the war wasn't going to be over, so he sent a few men to go to Thailand and find the way there. After a year, those 3 men came back, and they wanted to take us back to Thailand. And the adults were talking, and they were thinking that among the children and women, with a lot of the widows, were going to take about maybe 2 to 3 weeks to get to Thailand. But once we leave, it took us almost a month, because we got ambushed twice on the way to Thailand. So we had to go back to the mountain and hide up there some more. And then my uncle, who was the leader at the time, he got the first time we got, actually the second time we got ambushed, he was able to go across the river with his wife and 2 of his kids, and the rest of his kids were stayed behind with us. And then we went up to the mountain. We stayed there for about 10 days, my mom said. And so after that, once my uncle got to Thailand, he sent some people back to get us. And after 10 days, they found us, and then we finally made it to Thailand in April of 1979. But once we got to the other side, the Thai soldier came, and they took whatever little position that we had were taken away from us. But we were just so happy that we didn't get deported back. once we got to Thailand, there was an agreement between the United States and the Hmong people and the involvement of during the Winter War, where we were the Hmong men would be rescuing the pilot. If there are any pilot that they had their plane went down, American soldier, Hmong men would be out there rescuing them. Then, so because of that agreement, we were permitted to go to other countries who were willing to accept us. So as a result of that, we decided to come to the United States. And my family, so my mom and my family arrived in the United States in February 1980. I was 10 years old when we got here to the United States. I started 3rd grade in Denver, Colorado. But it was too cold up there, so we decided to move to California in May of 1981. And life in a new country was a struggle for my family because my mom had never been in school before, in a new country, don't know how to drive, can't speak the language. So she, but she was a very smart lady. So she enrolled in an ESL class at Mercer College. And we all go to school. We were all in school, and she was working. She would be working in the field, picking strawberries and fig and all those. And she also, I remember she was also working, like on the weekend, she would be cleaning house, like the house cleaning lady. And I would go with her on the weekend to help her out. Or during the summer, I would be out in the field working with her in the strawberry field. But like I said, life was hard. We don't know how to drive. So everywhere we go, we walk. Going to school was always a struggle for me because I do not have anybody to help me. But even though it was difficult, I knew that I want my life to be better. Seeing what my mom has gone through every day and where we lived back then. Right now, I took my kids back to where I used to live. And they will say, Mom, you used to live here? This is so ghetto, you know? But that I said, well, I grew up in the hood, you know, that's where I came from. So, yeah, but I know that I want a better life for me and for my kids, because I don't want them to have to go through what I have gone through. So I was the first one in my family to go to college and graduate with a bachelor's degrees in liberal art at Fresno State in 1994, and then I continued my education. I went to finish my credential at Stanislaus State in 1994, and now I'm currently a teacher at Adams Elementary, right there. I've been with them for 14 years teaching kindergarten. Prior to that, I taught various districts, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th, all grade, you name it. So altogether, I've been teaching for 22 years. I now live in Merced with my husband, who is also a teacher. Together we have 6 children, 4 girls and 2 boys. Thank you very much for listening to my story.
So our next speaker is Maria Duran. Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Maria Duran, and I'd like to start by telling you guys a story that my father always tells, and that's my first day here, my first day of school here in the United States. And we had just came to the United States, and we were here for about a month, and we were living in Clovis, so I had to go to school in Clovis. It was about August, so we were getting ready to go back to school. I was 5 years old, so I was going into kindergarten. And so we go to school, and my dad he walks me to the classroom, and before we go to the room, he like kneels down beside me, and he tells me in Spanish, "Mija, nobody knows you. Nobody knows how to speak Spanish here. Don't be scared. Just communicate as well as you can with your hands." And so I said, "Okay, Dad." You know, and to him, he'd think, you know, I would start crying, maybe throwing a tantrum, because I didn't know anybody there. But all I said was, "Okay, Dad," or "Sí, papi." And so he let me go inside the classroom, and he left to work with fear and hope for me. And he says he was so anxious that whole day. And so he comes back to the school, and he waits for me to get out of the classroom. And once I do come out of the classroom, he gives me a hug, and he goes, "Well, how was your day?" And I said, "Good, Dad. I already made 3 friends." And he said I was so excited and enthusiastic, and he just said he was really proud of me in that moment, and he thought I was really brave. And he always tells me these stories of when I was younger and how I was brave. And I did have to grow up and mature very quickly, because we came here from Mexico. I was born in Mexico. And crossing the border, it was me, my little brother, he was 3 at the moment, and my little sister, and she was 2 years old, so she was only a baby. And we had to cross the border separately, so I had to take care of my little brothers. I had to change my sister's diapers as a 5-year-old, and I had to make sure she wasn't crying, and I had to take care of them both, make sure they had something to eat. How we left, they told us that we were going to Disneyland, and what kids don't want to go to Disneyland? So they were like, "Yeah, let's go to Disneyland," and me and my little brother were so excited, and the 2-year-old, she was a baby, so she doesn't know. But so we got in a car with a random stranger, and we were going to Disneyland. And as time went by, I realized we weren't really going to Disneyland. And now I think, like, wow, why would my parents do that? But I kind of also understand. So we came to Fresno with family members I'd never met before in my life, and we were living there for like 3 months, because it took my parents 3 tries to cross the border. So after 3 months, I finally saw my parents, and 3 months seems like forever to a 5-year-old. So once I saw my parents, you know, it was all nice for me, and then we finally got our own house in Clovis, and then again we went to a little place called Madera Ranchos. I'm not sure if you guys. So it's a very white community, and so growing up there, before we lived in Clovis, and in elementary school, you know, I'm in school, and I'm from Mexico, and I speak Spanish, and everybody was like, "Oh, that's nice. Can you teach me Spanish?" And there's no shame. I didn't know anything. I was innocent. And as you know, you grow up. As I grew up, I started realizing that sometimes people don't like it when you're from Mexico, or that you speak Spanish. And you know, growing up, that kind of confused me. Should I be ashamed of where I came from, or what do I do? Especially in the high school I went to, it was basically all white people, and I knew I was different, and I knew I didn't fit in. And so thankfully, like, my parents were super supportive, and I had super supportive teachers, and you know, they would help me out with that kind of like, what should I think? And at a point I was embarrassed, and I was ashamed of being Mexican. But my parents kind of turned that around, saying, you know, this is where we came from, telling me these stories. I knew they sacrificed so much for me to come here and to have a better life. They had to leave their family. My mom had to leave her job. She was a nurse over there. She would work at a laboratory. And then if she comes here, she's, you know, cleaning houses as well. And my dad's a mechanic. So I know we came here for a better life, and I'm super thankful for that. And I do have a better life. I'm not sure what my life would be back in Mexico, but I am happy now. I'm doing a lot of things. I am a second-year college student. I'm also under DACA, but which gives me a lot of opportunities here in the United States, and I'm super thankful for that. And I'm just glad there are so many people who support students like me. And one of the reasons I'm here telling my story to you guys is because there are a lot of students that feel invisible and that feel scared. but I'm not scared, and I know that I can do a lot of things here in this country. But that's my story, and thank you guys so much for listening.
I'm starting to think that along with the notebooks, we probably should have handed out those cute little tissues,
Right.
the little tissue bags, because some of these are incredibly moving stories. Next up, we've got Jack Shavor, and Jack is going to share his story of his great-grandmother and grandmother and their journeys that led the family to California.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Fresno County Library, and thank you, Bitwise. And the previous speakers, weren't they terrific?
Yeah.
Let's hear it for them. Okay, you like them, so now the pressure's really on. Okay. I'm going to share with you the story of my grandmother and my great-grandmother, two different journeys, so I have to talk fast. And I'm not accustomed to talking fast, so here we go. In 1926, my grandmother was 36 years old, living in Detroit. She was married, the mother of three. One of them was my mom, obviously. And these bumps started to appear on her eyelids and under her eyes. And eventually, it affected her vision. She went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you need to go to a drier climate. And so that's how, on mom's side of the family, that's how we came in 4th of July, 1926. They took the train, and that's how we came to California. And she always said that she was grateful because she loved Fresno. I love Fresno. All of you love Fresno. We're happy to be here. And that's my grandmother's story, but there's more. There's this other journey that she took when she was 5. It makes me nervous just to tell it to you. When she was 5, she wasn't living in Detroit, and she was living in a town in Turkey. The name of the town was Harpert, and they were Armenians living in the area there, and the Turks decided they had an Armenian problem, and that their solution to the Armenian problem was to exterminate them. And so beginning in 1895, the soldiers came into the village and set the Armenian houses on fire. When they ran out of the house, they would either kill them, capture them, kill them later, or marry them off, or do something otherwise horrible and terrible. And the upside to this, if there can be an upside, was my great-grandmother. We called her Big Grandma, and I was fortunate enough to meet her. Great-grandma was friends with her neighbors who were Turkish, and because of their mutual respect and friendship, somehow this man knew that trouble was coming, and he said to her, I would like for you to come and stay in my house for a few days, and we've prepared a place for you and your daughter, my grandma Ruth, in the attic. And she said, why? Don't ask any questions, just stay with me for a few days. And so they went. Now my great-grandfather was already in the United States. He was a shoemaker, and he had heard about more advanced sewing machines. So he was over on the East Coast checking that out. And so they were up in the attic for a few days, and my grandmother, 5 years old, got restless and stamped her foot and said, "I want to play." So they said, "Okay, we'll go down, play in the yard for a little while." And while they were playing, my grandmother later, many years later, wrote this in a journal that she kept. She heard this very loud whistle. When my great-grandmother heard that whistle, she grabbed her daughter, ran back to the house, ran up 2 flights of stairs and closed the door and drew the curtains because she suspected something was about to happen. And sure enough, the soldiers came, and when she peeked out the window, she saw that they had set her sister's house on fire. She passed out, and my grandmother still remembers, of course, I guess, I imagine we would remember something like that. And when she, the woman of the house, the Turkish woman, revived her and said, "You know, we think in a few days you should probably try and go, you know, because it's not going to get better." So, my great-grandmother, it was just Hannah, that's her name, and Ruth, her 5-year-old daughter, husband wasn't around, began to make plans. She contacted a missionary in the area, and they said, "We'll give you a horse, a wagon, supplies, if you'll help us." How can I? What do you want me to do? "We want you to pose as the mother of some of these orphans and take them to Istanbul. There's an orphanage there." So I'm trying to guess here, 25-year-old great-grandmother posed as the mother of 15 children. And it was a 700-mile journey. And somehow, some way, my grandmother didn't detail that aspect of it. What kind of dangers they encountered, where the soldiers were, I don't know. I don't know how they did that. But they made it to Istanbul, delivered the 15 children, who each one had a tragic story to tell, and then made arrangements to take a ship to Paris. From Paris, they went to Worcester, Massachusetts, and that was their, if not for the courage, and there have been a lot of stories today about women who were strong and courageous. And I think in this day and age, it's important to respect and honor the women who have demonstrated those qualities. And so they were in Worcester for 20 years. Then my grandfather was tired of working in a shoe factory. They came to Detroit. He assembled cars for 2 years and were making good money. But my grandmother developed her eye situation. And so I've discovered that life sometimes is just a series of coincidences and mishaps and crazy things, and we just keep moving and doing what's right. And that's my story. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Joacio Rodriguez. Is originally from the state of Michoacan, Mexico, and has lived in California for 17 years. He's the son of immigrant farm workers and currently lives and works in Fresno. And I have had the pleasure of working with him several times over the past 3 years. So I'm excited to hear the stories.
Thank you, Michelle. Like Michelle mentioned, my name is Gelasio Rodriguez, but my full name is Gelasio Rodriguez Delgado. And like the previous speaker, I usually carry my both last names because I am proud of my mom. She is very strong. And listening to the stories that have already been shared, there's a lot of similarities, mine and theirs. So my story begins 17 years ago in the state of Michoacan, which is in the west central region of Mexico. I lived in a small town, Turicato. It's in actually I'm not too familiar with it, where the state is at, but it's somewhere in the mountains. And my mother decided to migrate to the U.S. because at that time my father was already living in the U.S. and he had come a few years before to try to send us more money so we can have a better life and better quality of life and to provide for us. But obviously things happened, things got in the way, that didn't happen. And so my mother was on her own with 10 children trying to figure out how to feed us, how to put clothes on our back, how to put us to school, how to keep us from falling in with the wrong crowds. So it was getting too difficult, and she decided that it was best for her to be next to my dad, and so that we can have a father figure in our lives, because she was having a hard enough time being both our mom and our dad. So at that point, that's when she decided to come to the U.S. That was in the year 2000, in the month of September. I was only 7 years old, so I didn't know really what it meant to come to the U.S. or come to California or what it entailed. So for us, we just got on a taxi. We went to the next biggest town over. We got on a bus, and we started our 1,200-mile trek from the state of Michoacan to the state of Sonora up to the border, where we're gonna walk. And from that long bus ride, the one story that is always kept in that I've been able to remember very vividly is when we were halfway through in the state of Chihuahua, we stopped and we got off on bus and we were waiting for the next one. And while we were waiting, my mom took us to a restaurant to get us some sweet bread and some coffee. And in there, everybody would look at us strangely because they're not used to seeing a mom by herself with 10 kids getting off on bus and waiting for the next one. So they would ask her, "Where are you going?" So she would tell them, "Oh, we're going to California." And they would all give her this crazy look, thinking she was crazy. What was she thinking, wanting to cross the border with 10 kids? So that's when I realized what we were in for. I was having fun up until that point, doing little kid stuff, pointing at stuff, making jokes, losing stuff along the way and getting scolded for it. But that's when I got afraid, because I knew that something bad could happen. And when we made it to the last stop, which is in the town of Naco in Sonora, that's where our journey transitioned from being on the bus to traveling by foot. And that's when myself and my siblings, we all realized, okay, so this is real. We are about to walk the desert, and bad things could happen. So we all just realized what we were in for, and we didn't really talk, but we were just being pushed along by my mom and everybody else that was going with us. And day and night we walked. We didn't really stop for long breaks. We just kept walking. And sometimes my mom would tell us how there were times when all of us were walking while sleeping. So we were literally sleeping, but we couldn't stop. So they were just dragging us along, and we just kept walking. And halfway through crossing the desert, we lost all of our water, because there was a time when we thought we were going to get caught. So we just had to drop everything we had and run. So there was a few days that we went with very little water, until we came across a dirty pond, and that's where we found our next source of water. So we drank from that, and I feel like some of us got some medical issues because of that, but we made it through. And so once we actually made it through, we settled in a small town in California, in the Central Valley. The name is Woodville, which is about an hour and a half southeast of Fresno. We lived there for about nine years. We went to elementary school, we went to high school. My mom worked in agriculture along with my dad. They worked to put us all through elementary, through high school. They worked to put me through college, and my younger siblings, they're still there. So in our family, I was the first one to graduate from university, and I'm still trying to provide for myself and for them as well, as much as I can. But I just have a lot of respect for my parents for abandoning everything that they loved and everything that they worked for, in Mexico to bring us over because things were not working out for them over there. And this is the first time that I share my story publicly, so I'm nervous up here. I'm trying to do my best, but I've come to understand that being undocumented in this country has its disadvantages, and we try to work as best as we can with what we got. So, like Maria earlier, she said she's a DACA, so as am I, and that's helped me a lot. I've been able to work a lot with immigrant communities here in Fresno, helping folks apply for the program. Others apply for the citizenship, others apply for other family members. So it's really cool being able to come to this country, learn the language, learn the culture, be assimilated, and now helping other people go through that process as well. Just to summarize, the stories that we go through, the hardships that we go through, they all count for something, and that makes us who we are. And I think it's important for us not to forget where we come from, our families, our culture, and obviously be willing to accept new ones, but never forget where you come from. And for that, I will always use my both last names, Rodriguez and Delgado. Rodriguez because that's it's a cultural norm for you to take your father's last name, but also I use Delgado because I respect my mom, I love her, and I don't want to forget the hard sacrifices that she did to get us to this country. Thank you.
So next up we have Raimundo Gonzalez. He lives in Fresno. He's married and has an adorable 5-year-old daughter. He's a Fresno State graduate and is currently an AmeriCorps VIP Fellow with Go Public Schools Fresno.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really nervous. First time I share this in public. But my story began in 1994. I was 2 months before my 9th birthday. I remember having dinner. We were off from school, so it was the summer, but for me that meant going to work, taking care of animals. So I was having dinner with my mom when she gave me the news that we were moving to the U.S. I was excited at the time. I'm from Oaxaca, Mexico. That was like the dream to come to the U.S. I don't know what it meant. It was just like everyone's dream to come here. So we had about a month to plan for our trip. I was very close to my grandpa at that time, and I remember like that month just flew by. So the day finally came when we started our journey. I remember my grandpa went and dropped us off at the bus stop, and I was excited but sad at the same time because I did not know if I would ever see him again. So we got on the bus, went on the bus to Mexico City. From Mexico City, we were traveling. It was my mom, my younger brother, and my baby brother, and we were traveling with my mom's uncle, her dad's brother. So we got to Mexico City, got on the plane, and in TJ, my dad was waiting for us already. So met my dad, and I was 9 years old, so at this time I had already forgotten what had happened. I was just excited to see my dad. My dad had arranged everything for my little brothers to come to cross the border illegally. At the time, he had applied for us to become legal, but like someone said before, it's a long process. So my dad couldn't wait for us. He would every summer he would come here, work, and then in the winter he would go back home. He was just tired of doing that, so he decided to just relocate the whole family. So when we got to TJ, like I said, he had already planned out everything to cross my brothers over, and my mom and I had to cross the border illegally. So on the first attempt, I remember it was around 5 or 6 in the evening, and we went and they gave us a bag, had no idea for what, and like, trust us, just take it with you. So we grabbed the bag, went underneath the fence, and we went into the night, and we walked for a long time. I remember the walk, but it came to a point where I don't remember anything. Everything was just dark. I don't know if I fell asleep or what happened. But I woke up the next day, and we were in San Clemente, just north of San Diego, and we were at a hotel. So I was okay, cool, we're here. But we got on a taxi. My dad had a letter saying that if we were here, it would be fine for us to be. It would be okay for us to be in the U.S. So my dad knew there was a checkpoint in San Clemente, so we came on the taxi, and I don't know if the taxi driver was really nervous. They pulled us over, and they were asking us like, "What do you? How do you guys get here?" and this and that. And so the border patrol lady saw us, and she noticed that there was mud in her shoes. So my dad tried to explain, you guys. Well, my dad tried to explain, saying, we just came to San Diego, and then she's like, no, I don't believe that. I don't buy that. So we got detained, and I was told that we would be there for a couple hours, and I spent the whole day there. I think it was maybe 10, 12 hours, and at that point, they had to send us back because they couldn't keep people overnight, I guess. So from that experience, I just remember telling Mom, I do not want to go. I want to go back home. And so they decided somehow they convinced me, and we did a second attempt. And the second attempt, we were to do it during the day. And in the daytime, it's hot. I don't remember the first time or what it was or how we were going to do it. But this time, the coyote had promised my dad that we were going to make it all the way to LA. And from there, it was all up to my dad. So my dad agreed, and my dad was here already legally, but for fear that, something would happen to us, he decided to do the journey with us. And that he was risking him losing his green card because he was doing that for us. And that takes a lot of courage, I think. But I mean, who would he do that for his family, right? So it was maybe like 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning. We all went and met up a group, and there was another kid who must have been my age, or I don't recall, but we were waiting, and then finally they told us, all right, it's time, so we started walking, and every time we would hear something or see something, we would have to hide. We would continue the journey, and then finally we got to a pickup point. They picked us up and drove us to LA. So from there, I just remember I was excited to finally have that I had already crossed the border. It's really, from there, that was just part of coming to the country. I mean, I still had to experience the whole assimilation process and all that stuff. So I feel like I have to share my story like everyone else, because these are stories that makes us, and we have to be able to accept everyone for who we are, and we have to understand our stories. I think that if we are not true to ourselves, who we are, I think that we tend to, just go on about our lives and not caring about other people. So I think it's important that we care about other people in our community, because at the end of the day, that is who makes us, and that is what makes Fresno.
Thank you so much for sharing. I want to thank all the speakers so far and yet to come, because this has been just incredible. These stories are I'm going to use the word incredible again. They're absolutely amazing. Our next speaker is Sergio Ignacio Cornell. If you want to come up and share your story.
Good afternoon, everyone. My story begins with my parents immigrating from the southern state of Oaxaca in Mexico. They came into the Central Valley as migrant farm workers, and they settled in the small town of Parlier, southeast Fresno. I remember being facing different challenges with different. It was a different environment due to coming from a indigenous background. Mixtec, Zapotec being embedded in my family, and so I faced some discrimination based on my skin color from my fellow classmates, and their families were also from Mexico. So it was a kind of a different experience for me. Little did I know that in my town there was a particular gang, very influential, organized crime, and it started captivating me. Most of my family and people that surrounded me were involved in this gang heavily. As I used to go to school, walking home, I used to see the tag walls. I used to see Roman numerals on the walls, and it was just violence was everywhere. I used to see as I walked home, I used to see fights in the streets. I used to see gang retaliations. I used to hear stories about stabbings, shootings. Some of my family members were involved in gangs, so this is how most of these gang members started reaching out to me. Little by little, I started getting involved with them. My parents were coming from work, heavily tired, working in extremely long hours, and this was a perfect opportunity for this gang to really reach out to me and bring me in. It offered me respect, it offered me protection, which primarily was one of the reasons why I joined, and it also the sense of seeing another individual being afraid of you. You had to really work. The more I got involved, the more deeply I found myself involved with this particular gang. I remember going into juvenile hall when I was 13 years old, being in my cell. Obviously, my mother was really worried for me, so she tried everything in the best effort to try to pull me away. But the influence from this gang, the history they were teaching me, the politics of the career path that they wanted me to go into. They taught me history, their own history. It was an agenda that they had. They showed me their own worldviews and the politics that I'm to expect once I go to prison. So throughout being 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, my dream was to go to prison and meet the founders of this group and meet the what do you call, because most of the orders that were coming from, to my town were coming from Pelican Bay out in Northern California, and so there's a very strong influence of these leaders reaching out to these communities in this secret world that most of these communities are not involved in. Meetings taking place, and this is where the brainwashing enhances one's knowledge. So I went back into juvenile hall when I was 17 years old. Once in there, I started getting involved more deeply. I came out, I started moving up in the ranks in the gang, and it wasn't until I saw my childhood friends getting attacked and brutally beaten, or most of the times dropped from this particular gang. If you couldn't question it, you couldn't question anything. So it was structured in a way where you couldn't really challenge the ideas that were being proposed to you. Whatever they said goes, and so that's the fine line I was walking. It wasn't until I was 18 years old, I wasn't in school at this time. Most of my schooling came from there, and so that's really all I knew. I was 18 years old, and I saw the beating of a close friend of mine, and they beat him so severely that it impacted me in a way that I told myself, if I continue down this path, either I'm going to die or I'm going to end in prison. And I remembered all the people that were around me, giving me support. But especially when I got back into school, I went to Sanger Adult School. I was 18 years old. They told me I was behind in credit, so I went to Sanger Adult School. I had a lot of good instruction from different professors there. They pushed me forward. They kept me out of gangs, and they always told me that continue going down this path of education. So I graduated from Sanger Adult School. I had a professor there, Miss Hernandez. I still remember her name. She drove me to Ridley College. She wanted to pick me up in my house. And she told me, you need to continue going to school, and this is the only way you're ever going to come back to your community and help all these gang members out here, and speak on these problems that not a lot of the community members know. I went to Ridley College. My reading and writing were very basic, but because of the instructors at Sanger Adult School, they're pushing me forward. I managed to graduate from Ridley College and push forward to go in Fresno State. So I came in there and I was really motivated, and my passion was always reading. Reading was a major thing since I was in the gangs. I always wanted to learn history, and since I was in juvenile halls, reading was one of the things that really kind of took me from the gang. I started reading a lot of historical cultures, governments, and things, and this is one of the things that made me question the gang as well. So I majored in criminology at Fresno State. I'm still in the field of criminology and history. So I'm a double major there, and I'm looking to do some research and publish in the future for trying to expose the ideas of this organized crime and try to prevent and deter young juveniles from joining gangs. So I look forward to going to probation, the field of probation, and working with young juveniles and doing a lot of these events to try to let the community know that there is a secret world out there, and there is a very organized, particularly gangs out there that are ready to take your children if parental supervision is not at its forefront. So, thank you for listening to me.
Next up, we have Marcos Dorado. He's a full-time visual artist with a studio at the T.W. Patterson Building, and he's currently preparing for a solo exhibit at the Fresno Art Museum called Immigrant Me.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank all the organizers, too, for putting together this amazing event. You know, after hearing the accounts of my fellow Mexican immigrants, I have to tell you, I had the very easy way into this country. Upon arriving in Tijuana and spending the night in a hotel, this is in 1974, and my next birthday I'll be 50, so I was 5 back then. We met with a coyote, and he told us in the evening, just take a taxi up Avenida de la Juventud, where it curves to the right, get off, there'll be a stoplight and a blue convenience store. It's been vacant for a long time, there's no one there. Get off there from the taxi, go around the store, and you'll find Frankie there. He'll be smoking a cigarette so that you can see him easily in the dark. If there's a slit in the fence, you and your family would just walk right through. That's exactly what happened. We went right across, crossed over the freeway on foot, And then Frankie took us to a bus stop, and we caught the city bus. And then by midnight, we were in San Diego. There was just two annoying things, and that was one, they put us in a room where there was a lot of people, and this guy would not shut up. He kept talking and talking and talking, and I was incredibly sleepy, and he just wouldn't shut up. Finally, I guess the sleep got the best of me. The next big thing that happened on my trek up to beautiful Madeira, the following day we arrived in Pacoima in the morning, and the coyote instructed my father not to leave the hotel, to stay there, and that they would bring us food. Well, that was around 8 in the morning. By 3 p.m., no one had shown up to give us food. So we were absolutely starving. Both of my parents, my sister Gloria, my brother Mike, Miguel, and me, who was 5 as the oldest. So my dad decided to go out. On the way out, he met the coyote, said, "Hey, you're not supposed to get out." Well, there was no food. To make a long story short, they brought us food. So that brings us to my second mishap. I got to taste the most disgusting food that exists in all of the planet, mayonnaise. I have never, ever seen or heard of a sandwich. This 2 pieces of bread had ham and some disgusting spread that even though I had not eaten in about 24 hours, I put it in my mouth and I spat it out, and there was absolutely no way that I could eat it. To this point, don't bring mayonnaise near me. It is absolutely horrific. Now, in 1968 is when I was born in very northern Jalisco, 3 hours north of Guadalajara. And I was born in a house that my dad built with his hands by stacking one rock upon another. Imagine a slope. That was it. Just a slope. There was nothing else around. I mean, it's not even... You can't even find it on Google Maps, this area. It was so incredibly desolate. A couple of trees, some bushes, and a cactus. My first memory of my mom was, I asked her, she says I was 3 when I asked this question. I said, "What are we having for lunch?" And she began crying because we literally had nothing except for tortilla. And then I got the brilliant idea, hey, there's that nopal just down the slope. So we went and she picked the nopal and took the needles out, and that's what we had, tacos de nopales, which is very healthy, by the way. It was very meager times. To give you an idea of how desperate a family could be back then, even when the husband would leave to the United States. Of course, this is in the late 60s and 70s, where there's no internet, no Facebook, no Twitter. When a husband was finally able to scrounge enough money to make his passage up to the border, it could be a week before he finally crossed. And as you heard some of these stories, you could be stuck at the border for way more than a week. If you're lucky, within a week, you're in the United States. And if you're lucky, within a week, you might be in your destination. So that's 2 weeks. If you're lucky, you might find work within a week. That's 3 weeks. And if you're lucky, you get paid at the end of that week. That's a month that your family has not heard from you, gotten any money, and you don't know what's happening to them, and they don't know what has happened to you. So by the time a month goes by and they send you some money, it will be another week before it reaches northern Jalisco. And where we were, it would take 3 hours by horseback and on foot, because some of the land was so treacherous you could not ride on horse, before we got into the little tiny town of Totatiche. And there, we would only go on Sunday, so we would have to wait all the way until Sunday to see if there was mail. And if there was no mail, well, then you had to wait another 7 days before you could check if there was some money for you. So by the time the family over there, from a very responsible male adult, hopefully he's responsible, it may be a month, it may be 2 months before you get something. It was very, very tough. But we made it to Madeira in March, a Saturday morning, March 2nd, 1974. It was sprinkly morning. And I started school there. I'll tell you, because we're limited on time, I'll skip to the present. Now I am a visual artist, and my art studio is in the T.W. Patterson building. It's in the middle of 3 landmarks of 3 firsts for me in the United States. The very first time that we went to a real store in America was at JCPenney's, which was right across the Fulton Mall from the T.W. Patterson building. I was 5. The very first restaurant in which we ate was at Cancun, which is now Los Panchos, which is right across the street on Tulare from the T.W. Patterson building. The only time my dad took me to the movies was to see the last movie of Mario Moreno's Cantinflas, El Barrendero, and that was being played at Teatro Mexico, which is Hardy Theater, right over from T.W. Patterson building. Now my art studio is literally right in the middle of these 3 landmarks that were very important for me in my life as a child. And as you heard, I do art full-time. The exhibit that I'm doing now, it's called Immigrant Me, and these are life-size portraits of immigrants from various countries, along with their biography, and it'll open at the Fresno Art Museum in January. But I'm not here to give you a speech about my art. Obviously, what I would like for you to take is the story that I had. Growing up, it was incredibly shameful to be Mexican. I was called every horrible name. And I did everything to hide that I was a Mexican immigrant. In college, one of the most influential teacher that I had, Professor Alexis Corey, upon turning an essay to her, a short story, she said, "You should write about you. You're a Mexican, right? And you worked in the fields." And I said, "Yes." She goes, "That's what you should write about." And I thought, why would anyone want to write about that? I've been made fun of this all of my life. And so it's rather poignant that now I am here sharing with you, telling you that I was an illegal Mexican immigrant. Thanks to the law, amnesty law of 1986, we became legal residents. Had it not been for that, even though my dad applied in 1974, it would not have been until about 1996 that we had become legal Americans. So when people say, "Why didn't you apply?" Sometimes you do, but you have no legal path for 10, 20, or even 30 years, depending upon how everything goes. But fortunately, I'm here, and you are all here, and you all came here to listen to all of our stories. I really thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
So we only have a couple more to go, but I wanted to take a minute and let you know what's going to happen in a little bit here. If you didn't tell a story on the stage and you're interested in sharing your story, you might consider using what we have, they're called listening stations. And what it is, it's an iPad-based tool that allows users to record a story or a conversation. You can record just audio, or you can record audio and video. And the file then gets sent to you, and if you give us permission, the library gets the file and we can share it in our collection so that library users can access your story as well. So after the event, we'll have a sign-up sheet. We're going to set it up here on the stage, and we're hoping that we can guarantee about 6, maybe 7, depending on time. And if it will be first come, first serve, so there is a sign-up sheet that we'll get out. And we'll also have a sheet, an interest sheet, if you're interested in future events that will include the listening stations, so that you can get a chance to do that at a later time. But we're not quite done. We've got a couple more. Manuel Rivera, if you would like to come up and share your story. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Manuel Rivera, and to let you know where I come from, and also to learn why I don't speak very well the English. I never had a chance to go to school, and I have had a terrible time during my life. I started with my parents. My mother was from San Benito, Texas, and my father was from Mexico. He came to the United States in got to know my mother, and they got married in 1927 and lived there in San Benito, Texas. And then in 1928, I was born. And my father, being a Mexican, and his family was in Mexico, in the state of San Luis Potosí, he took us to Mexico, and we lived there. I learned to work in the field because my father was a farmer, and I was working with him all the time, taking care of animals and riding horses and all those things. My mother, because she was from the United States, her family was here in Texas, and my father and my mother, they used to send me to the closest town to look for letters from my mother's family. And it took me all day by burro or horse because I had to go across the hills and monte. It was far away. It took me all day to go and come back. And in 1942, we came back to the United States. And my father came first, and then my mother took the opportunity to come to visit her family. And the plan was that we were going back with my father when they decided to go back. But instead of that, they decided to stay here. And at one time, the immigration took my father and put him in a corral. But then and he told the immigration that his wife was a United States citizen, and his son too. It was me. So they let him go, and they just told him to get his papers in order. And so he sent me back. I was a little kid. My father sent me back to Mexico by train, and it was very difficult because I was so little, but there was nobody else to do it. I went to Moctezuma, San Luis Potosí, looking for somebody to give recommendations for my father to fix his papers here. And I went to the ranch where I used to live, and it was awful. I didn't like it no more because it was too dark. At night, I just see the shadows of the nopales and trees. I couldn't see. I got used to the electricity here, lights all over. And then 1942 we came back, like I said. We worked here, and then in 1947, it was the first time that I came to California with some friends. And I like it here. I like it a lot. In Texas, we had problems with, being Mexican, they didn't want us to go into restaurants. And they had a sign in some places, Mexican and black people are not allowed. And over here in California, it wasn't that way. So we could go anywhere. And also, my father was making $2.50 a day in the Rio Grande Valley. And when I came over here, I made $7 or $7.50 per day. It was a big difference. So I really like it. I kept sending money to my father as much as I could. He bought a house in Texas. And by the time I went back, because every year I try to be back by December for Christmas to be with my family. And I keep coming every year from 1947 to 1951. In 1952, we went, me and all my family, my parents and my brother and my sister, to the West Texas to pick cotton. And there, being so many hands picking cotton, we made pretty good. And we put an old big truck, 1941 GMC. I didn't know nothing about cars, my father, much less. And we had to fix it before we went back to to our home, to the Rio Grande Valley. We used to live in La Feria, Texas. And going by Los Angeles, I didn't even know that I need to have a license to drive, but I was driving. And where we make it to our home in Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. And then in 1953, I came to California in that big old truck and brought my brother next to me. We came to California to work and picking fruit over here in this area around Fresno and Clovis. We used to stay in Clovis working. We were picking peaches, plums, and apricots, and then picking grapes and all that. When the season was over, after we finished with all these jobs, we went to Texas again. And then 1954, I came again to Texas, to California, and I brought my parents and my brothers and my sister. And with us came a family, Flores family, which we were very close friends over there in Texas. And also the Nunez family, they came over here to Clovis. And we did much better over here, living all together with the family. Two of my brothers went to the service, into the army, and one of my another brother went with the Navy. So they did pretty good on that. My father bought a house in Clovis, and then there was a man, Roy Minton. He offered me a job to work for him in his ranch. So I accepted, and I went to work for him. And while I was working there, a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to work for the USDA Agriculture Department. I said yes, I accepted, and worked there until I retired. But while I was living in there, I always wanted to learn something. It sounds crazy, but it's what I was thinking when I was small. I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't even have a chance to go to school. I didn't know nothing, but I wanted to be a doctor. And then after that period, I started thinking about electronics. So when I was working for this man, Roy Milton, I decided to go to the Fresno Technical College to learn electronics. So I learned to repair radios and televisions and electronics in general. And I graduated in 1966. Because my teacher, everything was in English, but I filled my report in Spanish, and my teacher knew Spanish, so he checked it for me. So that's the way I graduated. And then I worked in the USDA for all these years until I retired. And I bought a house over here in Fresno, and we lived for about, I think, about 10 years, or maybe more. And then 1995, we bought a house in Clovis. And we sold the one that we have over here in Fresno, and we moved to Clovis, my wife and I. And that's where we live now. It's been hard for me not knowing the language, but Heavenly Father has been so good to me. He helped me all the time. I survived, and I'm here. And I thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
So our next up is Nina Perez Reed. She is a high school counselor, author, military spouse, and mother of 3 sons.
Good evening, everyone. The picture that you see is my house in Mexico. And although it had no plumbing, no electricity, you can see the adobes. This is a house that my father built. Many years of happiness. My first 9 years I lived in this house, and I have many memories that I treasure. And I believe that's one of the factors that encouraged me when I first came to the U.S., as many of you came and dealt with struggles that when we first started thinking of coming to El Norte, that magical place that everybody would talk about. That as a child I would hear, we're going to El Norte, and I was so excited because I love school and I look forward to coming to El Norte to live with my dad. After arriving in Pacoima, one of the other speakers talked about Pacoima, I was all disoriented. I didn't know where I was. I knew we were closer to my dad's house in Sanger, California. We got to the house, started elementary school, and that's where I experienced the first wake-up call. Other little kids, dark skin, black hair, just like me, would call me wetback, mojada, go back to Mexico, and I hated school because I was so terrified of this little girl. I also did not like smelling the food when I walked into that Lincoln Elementary cafeteria in Sanger, California. My nose was not used to those food smells because in my mom's kitchen I could smell the chiles roasting, the smoke making us cough when we were getting ready to have some homemade chile. So I never really enjoyed the cafeteria food except for the mashed potatoes and gravy, which are still my favorite to this day. My friends could tell you that. Thursday's fried chicken or turkey and gravy. I also experienced a harsh reality because we grew up without my father the first 9 years of my life. Coming here, I got to know my father for the first time, and I learned that he was a very macho man, raised by a father who had a belt, beat him, and they were raised in the Sierra, so child abuse was something that was part of my life now. And there were many years of hopelessness, there were many dark years, but I've found healing and my heart has found forgiveness. And the reason that I decided to share my life story is because I know that God put those people on my path to encourage me and to let me know that yes, you're a young immigrant girl, you're barely learning English, but you know, you got that ambition. You can do it. I used to be my own cheerleader. I would tell myself, yes, this little girl's chasing me around campus trying to beat me up, but if I fight her, I'll get another beating at home. So I told myself early on, someday you'll be respected. Someday you'll be somebody. And I told myself 5 years, 10 years, give yourself a little time. You'll be somebody. And that someday came. And the doorway to my success was getting an education. So as a high school counselor, my students hear it, my parents hear it, the community hears it. When I first decided to put my story in a book, and I saw the book in my hands, it was a scary, scary feeling because I said, people are going to judge, people are going to know my life. They're going to know that there were times in my life where I just hated my father so much. I just wanted to run away from that house. But that brain of mine, you know, there was something about it that told me, No, you're going to end up in foster care, or you're going to end up having a miserable life without your mom. Something told me, hold on to hope. So all those years, all the way up to sophomore year, that was one of the most difficult years of my life. I wrote a poem. That's when I discovered that writing would be healing for me. Sophomore year, I wrote this poem. That's when my father was put in jail because the nurse told about the beatings. What is peace? What is war? I can't tell the difference anymore. I can't distinguish between good or bad. Sometimes I wonder if I'm going mad. That was the mentality of a sophomore year student, because in my family, there was no peace, because my father was always, there was always something that we did wrong. I was a good kid, always following the rules, but I was very, very afraid of my dad. I decided to take that risk of writing that poem. I won the best sophomore entry. I decided to take that risk in writing that book after getting the blessings from my parents. And I told my father, yes, there's some parts that are not going to be so pretty, but I'm describing my reality at the time. And I'm in a different place today. So being able to help one person is all worth it. All that discomfort that I'm going to feel of having everybody know my life, it's all worth it if it can help one person. And that's the reason that I speak about this on a regular basis, because I know that there's somebody out there that needs to hear that story, that you can find healing in spite of all your circumstances, in spite of all of that ugliness from the past. If you have that hope, that positive thinking, that it'll get better, it will. Storms don't last forever. Thank you very much.
So we have come to the end of our live portion here. It's a few minutes after 4 o'clock. So here's the good news. There's food waiting out there for everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming and for all the help that we got to put this event together. Again, for California Center for the Book and California Humanities, for all their help and support in this. Bitwise for allowing us to do this here, and seriously for all of you guys that came out and spread the word. I really hope that we listen and learn and empathize a little bit with all these stories that have so many similarities from so many different places. It's been an incredible afternoon for me, and I hope it was an incredible afternoon for all of you guys. And don't forget to fill out your surveys. Make sure you put your name on it and a contact information so that you have a chance to win either the Kindle Paperwhite or the selection of books. And also because we like your feedback. Food's waiting, guys.